Welcome back to the show, everybody. No To Grow, a light to heavy duty podcast. Today, I have Mike Schwarz with Iron Buffalo, based out of Denver, Colorado, and Kalispell, Montana. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Oh, thank you.
Tell the audience a little bit about what you do, a little bit about your background and Iron Buffalo.
Yeah, so we are in Colorado. We're the largest independent semi-truck Class 8 repair facility in the state. We expanded into Montana, and there's kind of a whole story that I'm sure we'll get into around that. We specialize in, so we have a large facility kind of right outside of downtown Denver, and we specialize in vocational vehicles. So, and we maintain kind of the majority of the construction delivery fleet in the greater Denver area. So we work both on the tractor and the specialty truck mounted booms and other vocational specialty equipment that's mounted on there. So we specialize in that type of stuff.
And is that the same in the Montana location?
Montana is a little different. We definitely target similar types of services, but they started as a mobile operation, and their first mechanic specialized in forklifts, and so we've evolved into truck and trailer there as we've hired more people, and we now have a physical location. So when you're ready, we can definitely talk about kind of how that evolved and like why we have a shop that's 15 hours away and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. We'll get into some of the branding across states and how the operation's different, how it's the same. You come from a technology background, not a heavy duty or automotive background. Explain how you got into the space, and then let's talk about let's take advantage of your background and talk a little bit about technology in the business.
Yeah, so I have a bachelor's in business and a master's of science and engineering from the University of Colorado. I've lived in or outside of Boulder, Colorado since 1998. Left grad school. Actually, during grad school, I joined Sun Microsystems as a Java software engineer. And the first 20 years of my career, I'm 46. So the first 20 years of my career was in the tech industry. I went into consulting. I worked for like a small boutique consulting firm that got bought by a mid-sized consulting firm. And I worked in telecom and software and product and, companies like Google and GoGo InFlight and Western Union and Oracle, and both on the consulting side and also as an in-house employee. And at some point in my career, things didn't exactly go my way for a year or something like that. And so I was like, you know what, I want to get out of corporate America and buy a business. And I went on this journey, probably 3-year journey, where I looked at franchises, and then I was like, I don't understand this. I can't fit. There's successful franchises, and within the same brand, there's unsuccessful franchisees. And I'm just not sure I want to take the risk on that. So why don't I go buy a successful business? And then I was like, well, why don't I find a partner to buy this successful business with me? And so I convinced Austin White and his wife, who were kind of college friends, if you will, to look for a business together. And our hypothesis was that we wanted to be in some form of blue collar service industry, that we were both bringing some level of business acumen and professionalism that you learn in corporate America and really just isn't there in kind of that small business space. And so we did not have our hearts set on semi-truck repair by any means. And after kind of striking out with a different industry and different brand, but we learned a lot and cut our teeth, we found a company called Jayco Truck and Trailer based out of Denver that did semi-truck RV repair, all that kind of stuff. Rather large entity, pretty profitable. And so then we spent a year going through the process of, learning how to buy a business and closing an acquisition. Definitely, made some mistakes along the way. And then we've owned it since August of 2019. So just over 6 years now. And somewhere along the way, we decided, and it coincided with the Montana operation, that we wanted to rebrand it into Iron Buffalo. And the Buffalo comes from 3 of the owners. There's 4 owners, 2 families, has 2 husbands and wives. And three of those four owners are buffaloes, so CU buffaloes, and then the third has an affinity to buffalo. And we went through this whole naming selection process, and iron sounded like really tough, and so we called it Iron Buffalo Truck and Trailer, and hired a branding firm to help us with that and whatnot. So that's how I ended up here. And I actually maintained my career for a few years in the beginning, and then I went full time. Kind of walked away from all that, went full time in January of last year, so January of 2024.
Good for you. Well, thank you for the background. Love the logo, by the way, and the name. It's solid.
Nice.
How many employees do you have right now?
We, including the four owners, I think we're at like 53, 54 folks.
Okay. And do you have middle management in place?
We have started to build out what we call our leadership team. So we have a director of sales, director of ops. We have three GMs. So there's a separation between the owners and the operations at this point.
Okay. So let's go to the technology side of things. I'm seeing everything in this space. Some people are using a well, some people are still very old school and like paper based. I have a group right now that they have software that's over 35 years old. The company's out of business, and there's basically one person who knows how to tap into the back of the system in case something were to happen. So see it all across the board. From an operational standpoint, what do you guys use from a software perspective? What's important? What's not? What's the biggest ROI?
So I mean, I was, like I said, a software engineer, so I was pretty big into tech. Ironically, I'm not a big kind of anti-social media in a whole handful of ways, and so I'm not one of those that's on Twitter all the time, and every once in a while I go to Facebook. And I guess my lesson in life, just being in that industry, is companies take on a ton of software projects, and very few of those actually produce any kind of ROI. And so I'm very cognizant of that, and I'm very careful to invest. With all that said, every employee here, we have a G Suite workspace, and we use it pretty heavily. I hand almost everybody a Chromebook, and I expect them to use Google Drive and Google Workspace. And we use chat. We use Google Chat. We tried Slack, and we're just like, it's the same thing as chat. So we're very heavy on that. We operate our business off of Full Bay for shop operations, and we're one of their oldest, and they now have much larger customers than us, but a large customer for them. I'm on their customer advisory board. We then flow all that to QuickBooks. I have a person through some limitations with Full Bay. I've personally built an AWS in Lambda environment that pulls a bunch of data out of Full Bay and stores it in databases. And then it's actually my dad. We send him reports every week out of Full Bay, and he does all sorts of reporting stuff for us. And then, in terms of, and then we use, like, we're trying to beef up our operations, which is basically standard operating procedures, defining those better, aligning them to our value stream. And there's a whole purpose for that we'll get to in a bit. And so we use tools like Talify to document SOPs and track the usage of it and stuff like that. And so on the floor, we use every kind of tech software, like JPro and the levels of Cummins that we can get into, that not a dealership. So we use pretty much all the software. We spend a ton of money on that. What I would say, depending upon the size of the shop and what your real ambitions are, where we're headed is a couple things when it comes to tech. First, the large operations like Penske and Cox Automotive, what they're moving to is hiring less experienced techs. So we pride ourselves on having the best techs in the state and nationally ranked technicians. We compete in state competitions. We win those. We send the best of those folks to the national super tech competition, and they fare really well there. We we're the smallest business that attends, and we won the second most number of awards. So we're
congrats.
Pepsi and FedEx and Love's and TA Truck Center, all those companies. And they all have teams of people that are geared towards, competing in those competitions. So we do really well there. Where I'm going with this is some of the fleet management companies, the way they're approaching this is they're starting to supply Google Glass or something like Google Glass to their technicians, and they're literally able to. There's now tech out there that a technician can go to the truck and look at the truck through Google Glass, and it'll tell them what's wrong with the truck based off of DOT standards. It'll tell them what bolt to unhook for replacing this part. Like it's taking some of the knowledge and know-how that you'd expect a quality shop to have. It takes the need for that away. Now they're going to get themselves into some trouble here and there because it doesn't help with diag right now, but that's where they're headed. And so I think that they're going to be able to scale in ways and be more effective and improve the quality of their service at the behest of the low quality of their technicians in some case. And that's going to be a big challenge for independents that don't understand what they're doing and try to compete with it in some way. So I think that's where tech's going. I also think that depending upon where you want to go and the size of the business that you are, collecting data and analyzing that data is going to be pretty important, and using tools like ChatGPT to help you analyze that data. Like you can feed ChatGPT spreadsheets of stuff out of your system and ask it questions, and it'll answer those pretty accurately and even help you forecast. And where that might matter is those same fleets are, the way they talk to customers is they speak in terms of like maintenance contracts, where they're like, listen, we'll just smooth out the cost of your fleet into a monthly fee, and we'll bear the burden of the risk associated with that. And they're able to do that by looking at historical averages of the Freightliner 2022 Cascadia with this type of setup and this type of usage, and then basically say, we think it's going to cost X amount per month to maintain this, and we'll actually commit to that. And so they're smoothing out the operational costs for their customers, which I think the customers enjoy. They're helping the customers be more predictable, and they're kind of taking on some of the risk, and they're doing all that at a premium. So they're charging that at a premium, and they're making profit off of that, but then they're also kind of balancing out the cost swings associated with that. And so that's possible through data analysis and whatnot. And so depending upon where a shop wants to go and how they want to compete and what customers they want to get, those are some of the things that I think are coming down the pipeline.
Interesting. Yeah, really, really helpful. This is a really unique perspective regarding the glasses and kind of determining kind of what the issue is with the vehicle. I mean, how accurate is that? And do you think it's sustainable going forward? And is this a fix for not being able to find educated talent?
Oh, I think it's the future. I think, and I think it's, what I can tell you is if you go to the TMC annual meeting where they talk about recommended practices, they talk about the future of trucking and tech in trucking, and this has been a topic for them. And preventative maintenance stuff technicians are gonna be able to put on glasses, and just the glasses are going to tell them what they need to be looking for. I think that's all possible now, and I know there are companies doing it. And I think where it goes is that AI mixed with this. I mean, you can point the camera at a flower or a tree, and it tells you exactly what it is, right? So AI mixed with this is gonna. It's going to solve tech shortage issues and tech talent issues with the simple part swap types of jobs. So PMs, DOTs, and then your turbo's broken. What are the steps to replace a turbo in a truck? Like I think it can do all that. I think where there's no tech yet that really helps an educated technician that's responsible for diagnostics, like truly diagnose an issue with a truck. I don't think it helps with that yet, and I'm not sure how Google Glass is going to do that, because there's a whole bunch of stuff you need to do to a truck and data you need to look at. And you'd have to still grab all that and feed it to something to tell you this. Yeah. And there's no decision tree that we've found yet that helps people do that. So I think it's going to, and Cox is going for, PMs and part swapping out in the field. That's what they're going for. I think Google Glass is going to help with a lot of that. And they're going to take a lot of that. And that's very profitable stuff, right? So they're going to take a lot of that away from independent shops and other competitors. And that's bread and butter stuff for most shops. So I think it's coming.
How much is a Google Glass?
I don't know. And actually we, the research that we're currently doing is that there's other glass setups that are not made by Google. And I actually don't know the name of it because my partner is looking into it. That mixed with the software actually better at doing this specific thing. I was just using Google Glass as the the Band-Aid description of what the tech is. So we're looking into it ourselves to see what we can do with it.
Very unique angle. Yeah, I'm going to have to look more into this. To be honest, I have not heard about this solution or technology approach. So pretty exciting to hear.
Yeah.
It's like the Meta or Facebook glasses for commercial applications.
That's right. And I think it's coming in a bunch of different spaces.
Good. We mentioned that the locations are 15 hours apart from a driving perspective. I'll talk about branding. I know this is kind of a jump from technology to branding, but talk about branding across multiple states, and then we'll get into some of the customer and operational differences.
So let me just start by explaining how we ended up in Kalispell, Montana, which is one of the most beautiful places in the United States, lacking beachfront property. We had, so we're a family-run business, and we know our employees really well, and the ones that we rely on and trust and love, become very close to us, and we want to keep that as we grow. And so we had a trusted employee that went through a lot with us, just in her personal life, and she helped run our business for us. And she came in. We were going to take her on a vacation with her family, with our families to Costa Rica. She walks in about a month before and she goes, "Hey, just a heads up, I'm going to quit and we're going to move to Montana. And so if you want to uninvite me from this vacation, you're welcome to, no hard feelings." And so we kind of understood where she was we got to understand where she was going with this. And basically they wanted a slightly slower life and move to be near family. And so we were like, you know what, why don't you come on this vacation with us? And while they were there, we talked to them about do you want to, your husband is a mechanic, and so you do a really great job. We'd hate to really lose you. Would you like to rebrand with us and do something in Kalispell? And, didn't take too long for them to say yes. And so basically we bought them a truck. We made them part owners in that entity. They kind of earn into over, I think it's 10 years. And then we actually launched Iron Buffalo in Montana before we rebranded in Denver.
Yeah.
And you had some, I think we'll get to it basically runs, believe it or not, it's growing faster as a percent of revenue growth than we're growing here. And it's just to a certain extent because it's easy to go from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3. And the percent growth you get from that is higher. But I think we started as a mobile operation up there. Then we got to 2 trucks. Then we built a building because we couldn't find real estate. And now we're at 3 trucks, and we're at 3 mechanics, and she's looking to hire a 4th up there, I think as a truck. And so it's grown quite nicely. It's been about 2.5 years since we started. And we view that as a separate business. It's a separate P&L, separate QuickBooks account. They're separate, like they have ownership in it. So we roll them up when it comes to like total revenue and strategic planning and all that kind of stuff. We do share resources. So our mechanics call the main guy up there when they have needs on certain skill sets, and we actually will send people up there, fly them up there, house them when they get overwhelmed with work. And most of the guys that go up love doing it because of the location it's at. As far as branding is concerned, we do most of our branding based out of Colorado. I'm in the middle of a lot of it. So we have a videographer. We have, we print these T-shirts. We have graphic designers that help us with all that. And we do a lot with all that kind of stuff. And that's all based out of Colorado. And some of it mixes in the Colorado brand. So our next set of shirts and posters actually do the whole See Colorado thing. And then we manipulate it for Montana so that they can benefit from it as well. But most of that, like most of the reputation management, most of what we would call brand management, most of what we're doing in terms of getting our name out there, most of our spend, it's all in Denver. Like our growth strategy for the most part is Denver. And most of that is simply because the market there is so dramatically smaller that we think, over the long run, our dollar-based growth potential is in Colorado and not there.
That's very, very helpful. Appreciate you going over that one. Is there a difference in terms of customer needs between the locations?
Yes. Yeah. So it's actually funny in some ways. So customers that will not do business with us here are like desperate to do business. The same customer desperate to do business with us in Kalispell.
A bigger fleet? Just
fleet availability, like Sunbelt Rentals is a good example. We're dying to work with them in Denver, and there's just so much competition, and they have very specific ways they want things done, and so we just haven't kind of broken that seal yet. And the opposite is up there, like where we work with them every day in Kalispell for a bunch of various reasons. So, but yeah, it's a different customer base. A lot of logging, a lot of earth moving, a lot of trucking. It is a trucking corridor up there just because of where it is. So that and a bit of construction, but not the volume that we see here.
Yeah.
And then down here, we tend to focus on, we have a very specific like primary market that we focus on, which is mid-sized fleets that really are interested in us managing their fleet for them. Usually our primary target is a brand or a company whose brand involves the delivery of materials on their branded trucks. So a great example of that, and they're not a customer, is like Poland Spring Water, right? Part of the whole brand of Poland Spring is a Poland Spring truck shows up, and then someone gets out that's a Poland Spring employee and brings the water and into your house, your office. And so in the construction industry, you have those companies, and the reason why we think that's a great market is because you're shipping your own product, which means it kind of matters when it shows up, and the way the truck looks matters. The quality you put into repairs matters. The uptime matters. So you've taken the whole concept of, well, this is just a commodity that we're putting on a trailer, and it doesn't really matter who moves it. You're taking all that out, and instead you're saying, no, this product needs to show up on a truck that's well maintained with employees that know what they're doing, and that's part of the market and brand. So that's what we target in Denver, and then there's a lot of things to fix on a vocational truck that specializes in that type of stuff. So that's what we do here. So less logging, less earth moving, less of that, and more mid-sized fleets that are construction oriented, construction delivery oriented.
And is your SEO or anything like that some of your push marketing, or I guess in that case pull marketing, is that different between locations and kind of that marketing spin approach?
We don't think much about I'll give you this little detail. I think it was recommended we spend 10,000 a month in Denver on SEO,
Mhm.
and the budget in Kalispell is $100. So
Yeah. And
100
what
Kalispell gets you to the top pretty regularly, and 10,000 doesn't here.
what's the closest city to the big city to Kalispell?
Missoula, but it's separated by Flathead Lake. So there's a lot of isolation between. It's about 90 minutes north of Missoula, and Missoula is on I-90. So that's really where the trucking corridor is.
Mm-hmm.
But the real issue is it's separated by an Indian reservation and a lake, a very large lake, and you have to kind of drive through and around all that. So it's pretty isolated up there. It's close to the Canadian border. It's right outside of Glacier National Park. And it's just south of Whitefish, which is Glacier and Whitefish make it a big tourist attraction. So this is one of those places that, like Taylor Sheridan and Yellowstone, it's the pandemic convinced a ton of people to move up there, and so therefore there's a ton of growth and a ton of construction associated with that.
I had a neighbor 2 years ago that moved back to Montana from the coast of South Carolina. They loved it. Back. Yeah, they had a farm, and I guess we're just ready to get out of the hot, humid weather down here, and they basically called it God's country.
Yeah.
Inventory and drop shipping, is that different between locations? How do you handle that?
So it's interesting because parts suppliers are actually more open to us being a vendor of their parts in Kalispell because there's no competition.
Yeah.
We don't really drop ship. We often don't share parts because the parts are different. They work on more equipment than we work on trucks and vocational trucks. And we have a very large inventory in Denver that's poorly managed. So that's a goal for 2026 is to do better with inventory and do better with parts pricing in general.
Yeah.
So we keep it separate. And we have a lot of improvement to do. And like most shops our size, we have a ton of improvement to do in terms of inventory management and kind of parts procurement from a cost competitive perspective.
Yeah, I didn't have this kind of on our questionnaire, but let's chat a little bit about the tariffs and part supply. And this recording is September 26th. And, I want to talk about kind of where you were 3 months ago, 4 months ago, and where you are now. In terms of the impact of the tariffs on the business, procuring parts, that type of thing.
I honestly would need to ask them how much they think. I mean, we have a team of 3 down there procuring parts. And, in the Denver market, we're like the largest customer for most of the dealerships and most of the parts warehouses just because of the volume we do. And again, we do a poor job at most of this, but, and in reality, I'll say a couple things. One is, I think the pandemic had more of an effect on the ability to procure parts than the tariffs have. So everything changed once the pandemic hit. Just the lead times to get parts and the ability to get parts and companies' ability to have the inventory you need in the right place, that all changed once the pandemic hit. And I don't think it ever really recovered, to be honest with you. So we run into lots of back ordered stuff, and with vocational trucks, like when you get away from the tractor itself, with the vocational side of it, it's really hard to procure parts to begin with. Tariffs, I think, have had more of an impact on trucking in general than on the ability to get parts. If you're willing to pay the tariff, you can get the part, right? So I don't think it's, and of course there's a price associated with that, and people are pricing that in either directly. So we're seeing some vendors charging us tariff fees, and they do it after the fact. So they'll sell us a part, they'll ship the part, we'll install the part, we'll bill the customer, and then we'll get a bill for the tariff a month later. And so now we have to add a tariff charge preemptively so that we cover some of that cost associated with that. But I mean, your actual question was like ability to get parts. I don't think that's changed too much. Cost of parts, I think, has gone up. Well, actually, in the commercial trucking space, I think there's a lot of exemptions for it. But I think it's really affected trucking in general because I think it's suppressed truck volumes of freight in the country. And so in my opinion, we've been in a trucking recession for 2 years. So pre-tariff, pre-Trump. So we've had to take different strategies to grow because of that. I'm a no tariff kind of guy. Like I don't believe in this, but I can't say that it's directly impacted, our ability to conduct business per se. It's just, we need more customers that spend less money than we did before.
Yeah. Thank you for that commentary. I'm kind of jumping around here a little bit. I do want to go back to technology for a second and talk about any of the services that you're offering in terms of, software, electronics, maybe ADAS solutions. Are you doing any of that?
We do one thing, and it hasn't really taken off for us just yet, but we're about to offer a different service that I think will play into this. And so, yeah, some customers ask us to install this equipment, and so we'll do that. We do not have access to telematics for the most part. We don't have access to telematics with most of our customers. We offer for free a service called Whip Around, which is a offshoot product that is now integrated with Fullbay.
They're out of Australia, right?
I actually don't know where they're based out of.
I think they are. I actually need the CEO Whip Around for a bit.
Gotcha. So I didn't know that. But once Fullbay started offering the integration, we reached out to Whip Around directly, and we've basically sponsored it with 2 different customers that we're very close with. And our interest is it automatically creates service requests for your listeners, what Whip Around is it automates pre-trip inspections, post-trip inspections, and DOTs. So you can have a fleet of trucks, you can register all the trucks, you can provide Whip Around as an app that you install on your phone, and before a truck driver can get into a truck, they're expected to do a pre-trip inspection, and usually that's paper, and usually it's expensive paper. And so what this does instead is it kind of tracks that they did it, so they're now incented to do it because they'll get a report if they don't, and then it forces them to go through the truck and do a predefined pre-trip inspection. And when they fail things, it takes pictures, and when they fail things, it then creates, if you're integrated Fullbay, it creates service requests that I think first go to the customer, and then if the customer's like, yeah, let's get them to fix it, it then forwards to us. And then we call them up and we're like, hey, you want us to come out and deal with this, or you want us to pick up the truck? So we think it's beneficial because it really ties us to the customer. But at the same time, most of these customers are sitting on idle fleets right now because there's a recession, whether we acknowledge it or not, especially in construction. And so they're less interested in doing this stuff because of that. And I think it'll come around once things pick up. We are in the process of figuring out how to offer these service maintenance contracts. And when we do, and what we're doing is we're analyzing, like we maintain a handful of fleets like entirely. So we have all the maintenance data associated with that. And so we're coming up with a monthly pricing for different years, makes and models of trucks. And then, the goal is we lock them into a multi-year service contract for that. And as part of that, we will require access to their telematics. And what this does is it kind of ties the vendor to the customer in a bunch of ways, because the vendor's committing to specific pricing, and therefore their interest is lowering the cost of this maintenance. And so now you're asking the vendor, the service provider, to think about and pay attention to things like idle time, unnecessary idle time in trucks, which affects your after treatment and DPF systems, and abuse of those trucks. And so now you got like this third party that's watching your drivers like hide across the highway from your shop because they don't feel like doing that third load or whatever. And
Yeah.
you're calling it out to them saying, listen, they're sitting there idle. That cost me money in terms of maintaining your after treatment system. And so you got to do something about those drivers, right? So you've basically like this type of contract smooths out the costing, the operational cost of these trucks to the customer, but it also kind of aligns you with the customer's need of like minimizing costs instead of maximizing cost. So with that, we would need access to telematics and of course, help them make better decisions with how they use their fleet.
And then in terms of like, I keep getting off track a little bit here, but in terms of like, collision in the space, some heavy duty shops are fixing trucks from a collision standpoint. Some aren't. We're seeing, in the passenger collision space, the ADAS recalibration area is a big opportunity for growth. I know that, mainly some of the new vehicles are going to have this technology, but some passenger vehicles have 16, 17 cameras. Do you guys see any of that as a growth opportunity or not really?
We haven't thought much about it. I can tell you that there's a customer or two that have asked us to turn that stuff off.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's kind of get going here. We talked about this before, but you were a 24-hour shop before COVID, no longer doing that. Want to understand the difference for the listeners, how you think about a 24-hour shop versus a weekend shop versus just during a weekday shop.
When we bought the business, times were different. Trucking was, there was much more demand for repair and trucking. And there was a lot more money out there to spend kind of willy-nilly on it. Mm-hmm. And what we bought was a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week shop. They were open from Monday morning, I think at 6 a.m. until Saturday at 5. I think they closed it Saturday at 5. So
this was Jayco?
Yeah, this was Jayco. So they were open every minute from Monday morning at 6 until 5 p.m. on Saturday. And then they opened on Sunday from 8 to 5. Mm-hmm. And at the time, Jayco focused on over the roads and over the rotors and one and dones. And they had a few fleet accounts. And so you have a 24-hour shop means you have 3 shifts, right? You have A, B, and C, and your C is your graveyard from 12 to 8 or 11 to, something like that, 12 to 8, something like that. And then a second shift from 4 to 12. And then the first shift is 8 to 4. And, and so we operated like that until the pandemic hit. And then we closed our graveyard shift. And the bottom line is it's very hard to have a graveyard shift. What you really need is a customer that really requires middle of the night repair. And the customer that we were doing that for predominantly was we kind of lost them through all this, through the pandemic and whatnot. And so it made no sense. It's very hard to staff. You're not going to get your A players. It's hard to manage. It's hard to monitor. And so we actually pulled that shift into our second shift and closed. And so then we were basically open from 6 a.m. until 2 a.m. So we were closed for 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
And then the other major change that happened over these 6 years is we were over the road was a great business, in 2019, 2020, 2021, when shipping rates were super high and the dynamics were ton of demand in trucking, pandemic hits, everybody stays home. They're spending their money on consumables, right? Which means you need a lot more trucking, stuff stuck at ports. You need a lot more trucking to get all that stuff out of ports. And so shipping rates went through the roof and all these people got into trucking, like independent single owner operators or, couple vehicle owner operators. And they were making money, they were spending money, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was a great business. And then as people kind of started going out, then there was, I think we hear like there's vacation. What was it? It's like vacation revenge or something from the pandemic where everybody's traveling now. And they really shift their spending habits so that shipping rates fell. There's less need for trucking. And all of a sudden, all these people and companies making tons of money are not making money anymore. And the people that hurt the most are these over-the-roaders that went from making a ton of money to unable to pay the bills to maintain their trucks. And so a 24-hour shop, if you have a customer or two that can keep the graveyard shift open, what you're doing is you're catching those over-the-roaders. And you're open all the time. They know it. And you're catching them on Sundays. You're catching them on Saturdays. You're trapping trucks when no one else is open. And it works well. But the problem is if there's not enough over-the-roaders with real money to spend, then that whole market dries up. And so for a handful of reasons, we changed our model so that we focus on fleets. And we still service over-the-roaders. But to be honest with you, we see less and less value in doing it. And so now we closed our Sunday shift because the only purpose of that was to catch like one or two trucks that broke down. No fleet's asking you to do stuff on Sundays.
Yeah.
And we're open Monday through Saturday, and during the week we're open 6 a.m. currently until about 10 p.m. We pulled our second shift to overlap with our first shift. We may have to change that because of space in our facility. So we have a 30,000 square foot facility. We have 20 working bays, and we're probably at capacity at this point. And so now we need to push that shift back out in order to, past like 2 techs, we need to push the shift out, and they've started to realize that. So we may push them to 4 through 12 again, so that we have the capacity and the space to actually service all that. And then we're open on Saturdays from 8 till 4, I think. And the reality is the volume of calls from over-the-roaders, which is why you're open on, we do some overflow work from our fleets on Saturdays, but you're trying to catch trucks on Saturdays and Sundays, and you're trying to be open when no one else is. And the reality is just the volume of phone calls has fallen dramatically since 2020. And so there's less and less reason to do it for that reason. And the only other reason to stay open is that your customers need you to work on their trucks on Saturdays, right? So we do it for that reason. So customers want you to work on their trucks when they're not using their trucks. So that's at night and on the weekend. And so we've devised a schedule to kind of accommodate that.
And does your middle management and your leadership that you put into place, or maybe productivity can drop on Saturday if the owners aren't in the shop and so forth. Do you see any of that? Is that a risk to you at all, or not really?
We have 2 technicians on Saturday, and they're both flat rate. So we don't worry as much about that. I think there's been times when we've paid time and a half when we had less capacity during the weeks. We were doing more overflow work. We have a bunch of incentive programs that are designed to incent technicians to be efficient and to be highly utilized. And so we fall on that for the most part to stave away from the concern you have.
And before we get, you provide the closing advice to the audience, what's been the biggest growth inflection point in your business to date? Was there something that happened in a positive way that grew the business revenue?
It's interesting. I don't know if I can really identify that. I would say that in the first 4 years that we were open, since we owned it, we grew 18%. The pandemic was a little weird, so I think we were flat the initial year of the pandemic. But excluding that, we grew 18% year over year. And the past 2 years have been harder because the economy has really affected this. And so I guess I'll answer it in this way. So we have goals to grow that are pretty ambitious, which over the next 3 years require us to grow by 20% per year. And we're focusing on Colorado to do that. We're using EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system, to organize and align everybody. And we've had a couple of fits and starts on this mission, but I would say that this is kind of, if you want to grow, this is how we see it. You need to solidify your operations. And what that basically means is have true standard operating procedures across your value stream. Because as you start to scale past, we're tracking towards hopefully 11 million this year. You can't watch it. Like as an independent shop owner, you have to trust that there is a management team in place and that they're following standard operating procedures so that there's a level of consistency. It's just like McDonald's. You know what you're going to get when you walk into any McDonald's in the United States, good, bad, or indifferent. And that comes to standards and procedures, right? So build an operations process and a team that supports it so that you have consistency in terms of what your customers should expect. Then you got to build a sales team that will go out and sell into that. And if you do it in the reverse order, which we've done, you're going to get new customers to show up. And if you're not consistent in your product and your service, some of those customers are going to run away from you. And so we learned that lesson the hard way. So operations, sales, and then these next two don't have to be in any specific order, but you need to start to pay attention to parts, because as you start targeting more customers, they're going to pay attention to parts. And so you're going to have to compete on parts, which you may not have to do now. And so you need to get better deals on parts. You need to get parts less expensive. You may want to start offering parts so that you can, when the customer is like, we already got someone that does service, then you can start talking about parts, right? And then that gets you into their shop regularly, because you're now selling parts. And then you'll see that truck that's been sitting in that same spot for a month, and you'll be like, hey, what's going on with that? You want us to look at that for you? And then multiple locations. So, our strategy is to have a North Colorado, Central Colorado, Southern Colorado, and then a mountains operation. And so we believe that to get there, we need standard operations, sales team. We have to address parts in some way, and then we kind of expand into those directions, either through acquisition or through organic
greenfield expansion.
Yeah.
Excellent.
That's how we're thinking of it.
Yeah, very helpful. Closing advice. So obviously you're from a technology background. We went into some of the basics like Google Chat, right? And then went into detail around the glasses and kind of trying to diagnose issues with the vehicle. In terms of ROI, let's talk about an owner or a team that's not, super adept with technology. What's the biggest return on investment they should be looking at as we hop into 2026?
That's a great question. Is this tech specific?
Yeah, but if you have something else, feel free to mention that.
I would say, to a certain extent, using tech to do this, but I think the biggest return on investment is producing more revenue with the same number of technicians, right? Mm-hmm. So that's
revenue per technician.
That's training, that's efficiency, that's you want to keep that technician in their bay and not distracting them like by having to get trucks or get parts or getting tools. Like someone should be helping them. And so increasing their utilization and increasing their efficiency, using technology to do it, and whatever that looks like, looking at data, incenting them. Lot cheaper to get a single technician that you're paying $55 an hour to produce 150% efficiency. So 60 hours for every 40 hours that they work. A lot cheaper, a lot more better ROI than hiring two technicians at 80 hours a week to produce 60 hours in billable hours, right? So focusing on that and using technology to do that, whether that's just looking at data, whether that's incentive plans, whether that's hiring helpers to keep them there, whether it's using tech to track tools and parts and the quality of that stuff, or like the Google Glasses thing, right? Just speeding them up. You got to think about it from that perspective. in lieu of hiring 2 more technicians to produce another 80 billable hours a week, how can I do it with the, 10 that I already have or something like that?
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I think being aware of the revenue per technician is a good starting point to really think about this from.
Totally. That's and we do that. So we look at revenue per technician. We talk to them about it. We even have them compete a little bit on it.
And that's a very trackable KPI, very easy math to do. You mentioned a minute ago that I think you were trying to get to 11 million in sales. I would think that's for one location, right? But I think is that correct?
I think that's actually including Montana, but it's Denver, It's Denver and it's mobile. So we treat mobile as a separate business unit.
Got it. So I know you're trying to punch through a certain number, right, this year and continue to grow. You mentioned 20% year over year, which is it's a difficult target to hit. You got to exceed the market. You got to exceed all other businesses in your industry pretty much. Just recap how you're kind of thinking about this, essentially boosting the revenue per employee. Anything else that our listeners should be aware of?
Well, we set that goal, and I have it. We think by the week here. So we set the goal, we communicate that goal, we bring the leadership team into an offsite at a considerable expense to acknowledge that goal at an annual basis, and then break it down into quarters and talk about what are the things that we're going to need to do from a customer acquisition, operations, and investment standpoint to achieve that goal. And you're talking across sales, operations, and finance, and we break that into what we call quarterly rocks, and then we track those rocks on a weekly basis. And so we have like specific targets in terms of how many trucks need to be on the road from a mobile perspective. But in the end, I mean, it's every technician should produce $500,000 in revenue roughly. And so it's pretty simple math from that perspective if you're going to do it all through service. And so it's a matter of, there's a lot of customers out there. There's a value proposition for each of them. You got to figure out which of those value propositions work for you, and you need a strategy to kind of get in front of them and build relationships with them and make sure that you can serve them. And so that's kind of how we're approaching it.
Excellent. Mike, this has been wonderful. I think this is going to be an extremely informative podcast for our audience, which varies, from your mom and pops to your larger organizations. So really appreciate you taking time to prepare for this and answer these questions. I know it took some thought, and just really thank you for your time. And I get up to Denver every now and again. I go skiing once a year. So
cool.
Would love to meet up. Not by. Yeah.
Well, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure. And, hopefully I'll see you in Colorado.